Hi everyone. Oh, that was a bit manic. Managed to find a spot with some decent coverage now, so I've completely backed off the Wi-Fi, and we're now going 3G, old school. Hooray! So apologies for all the cutouts. I've forgotten where I got to. So I think we were talking about how the best way that we found to go about doing everything was to just pinch all the ideas that we thought were good around events at the time. So the one that stuck in my mind, as I was saying, was the fishbowl, which was all about participation and discussion. And I think that's the point I was at actually when the feed cut off, was that our thinking changed when we realised that the best thing to do was to think about participation and discussion being really, really important. And part of that was realising that we needed to kind of break away from that corporate culture where you give a predominantly sort of massive platform to people who are really confident at speaking and doing those sorts of things, because not everyone at every event will want to conduct themselves in exactly the same way, or, you know, the housing phrase that fits at the minute is one size definitely doesn't fit all. So we worked really hard then as part of the event to find different session formats that offered those different levels of participation, demanded different levels of concentration, different levels of seriousness of discussion. So we had stuff ranging from TechniQuest, who are this sort of legendary Welsh science institution that do lots of stuff with kids, doing like really wacky science experiments, came along and did a sort of mission to Mars egg drop style session looking at teamwork. We used the fishbowl session format, which I was saying about earlier. The World Cafe, which used lots of discussion but was a bit less kind of pressured in terms of yeah, the beard recovers quickly, sadly. That's why I constantly have one. The World Cafe session, which had lots of discussion, but it wasn't like you had to be speaking and performing in front of people. And then we had more traditional style content where it was a speaker delivering something. That came from lots of discussions we had about making sure introverts felt as comfortable as the extroverts at the event, and kind of democratizing that ability to contribute, giving people like the option to self-select how much they got involved, and also challenging the notion that everything important at a big event has to happen on a main stage. So once we'd kind of settled on the festival theme, we decided that the main stage bits should be those kind of like inspirational, fire up your thinking kind of things. But the more intimate, relational stuff could happen elsewhere. So the classic example of this is a personal favourite of mine, the Green Man Music Festival. All the really interesting stuff that you might be inspired to go and find from the things you see on the main stage are hidden away, and it's more like a journey of discovery. Also a plug for Green Man, because it happens like a mile away from where I grew up. Honestly, I think, like I was saying before, I don't think we nailed that exact mix of having big stuff on the main stage and little stuff for you to interact with. So I'm not quite sure. Maybe that's something for the Q&A section, is how you get that difference right about the sort of the mix of inspirational stuff and really, really practical stuff. Another part of it that I think was really important when we were thinking about it, and sort of was a big lesson that I've taken away from it, was about mood setting. We wanted to get away from formality, because that could be quite intimidating for people. So we concentrated quite a lot on mood. An inspiration for that came from actually the Scotland festival event that I mentioned earlier, which we just pinched the good idea. Their fringe bit took place in a tent, and there were blankets everywhere and flight cases for the PA, and it looked like the sort of the aftermath of a gig, but everyone was stood around sort of having a chat. So we pinched that idea wholesale. Our events team, oh my god, I don't know how they found this venue, or how they even considered thinking of this venue for a housing conference, but it's basically a warehouse that had been converted into a bar or like a nighttime venue sort of place. And that was a massive factor of getting the mood right. It was this kind of huge open space that you could walk around. It didn't feel formal like a set of conference suite rooms at a hotel would. It had all this kind of like quirky design stuff around the place. You know, it was really funny actually watching people turn up to the venue, because you walked in through a sort of 60s kitsch hair salon before you realised you were in this big warehouse space. But the main thing about it, though, was that it highlighted that you didn't have to behave at this event in the same way you would at like a big corporate formal event, by putting people a bit more at ease, even if it was by putting them out of context for work things. It sort of leveled the playing field about how people were going to act and behave. And then sort of that really was the main thinking behind what we did. It was about being out of context, being outside the comfort zone, whatever you want to call it. That was like the root of how everything came together. From the very first meeting we talked about it, we wanted it to be completely different, and to do that, we all had to acknowledge that everyone who had spent their time organising events, and that's not just events people, and that's sort of what I'll get onto in a sec. We all had to acknowledge that this was not going to fit with anything we had experience of doing. We had to challenge all the major conventions of events. So like thinking about the idea that when you go out to tell people about it, that the big speakers would be the draw for people to come to the event. For Housing Festival, the draw was the format and the culture behind it. You know, things like price, that you might provide lunch for people. But we wanted to get away from like conference chicken and that sort of thing. So we said, right, we need to get the price down under 100 quid. So we ended up bringing in street food vendors that work with the venue. And it ended up being a much better fit for like the feel of the event, but maybe didn't work for everyone. So that's maybe one we would change in the future. But it meant that we could get the price really low and make sure that it was a conference for people that do the doing of housing practice, rather than, you know, the higher price thing that all the senior people might go to. The biggest one actually was changing the idea that we would be the main drivers of what people talked about at this event. So I'm not going to say we knocked this completely out of the park, but what we wanted to do was have most of the programme set by the audience rather than us. That's not to say we were doing something like an unconference, because to my mind that's a really specific format and probably worth like, you know, an hour-long rant in the future about people doing non-unconferences and calling them unconferences. But we wanted to give people an opportunity to literally tell us what to put on the programme, because we wanted it to have relevance for them. So we did a bit of work where, when we advertised the event, we set up a form where we could take suggestions for the sessions and the topics and the formats. We only happened to have a couple of suggestions as it worked out, but something from all of them went into the programme. So one particularly that stood out was Emma from Trevalis sent us something about the welfare reform stuff, which we were planning to have just a guy from the DWP come along and deliver information in a really straightforward way. But actually what we found was that there were so many different facets of it that we wanted it to be much more that the speakers moved around the audience in the World Cafe format, actually looking at all the different issues. And then by having the speakers move to the different groups and tables, there was almost like a continual discussion about how those welfare reform aspects sort of linked up, and the different ways in which people were trying to mitigate or counter them and all those sorts of things. And it did actually, it snores is probably right if we were doing it the other way. But with that one, it became quite an energised discussion. That was the bit that I was actually stood with the school bell, kind of doing all the timings for and making people moved from place to place. And it was quite sort of inspiring that you actually had lots of different people with lots of different approaches, but finding kind of different solutions that all sort of made sense once you looked at them together. So there were loads of examples like that, loads and loads, way too many to talk about, where we had to flip our thinking over. But the biggest lesson from all of it, and this is where it kind of becomes less about the event and more about the way we went about doing what we did, was that we had a shared purpose. So when we first came up with the idea, it was that we wanted to do something that was completely different, and we all knew that that was the end goal. And And that kind of shared and dissipated the discomfort of working outside of the comfort zone. You know, working beyond the boundaries was made easier by the fact that we were all doing it together. And I think that's the thing that I've taken away and try and work on all the time now when I'm doing things, is having a couple of kind of pathfinder people that are going to race ahead and come up with really good ideas is great in some aspects. You know, that's how you develop new ideas. You need those people. But if you really want to make change happen and stick, then a shared purpose is the thing that's going to get everyone there. You can't really drag people along to new things. So way back when I was sort of like a little kind of nerdy kid sat in the events team doing all the admin, I was really adamant that we needed to do this event called the No Frills Conference, where and you just had a megaphone and you sat in hay bales in a field, and that would be enough for a conference. But actually, no one was really on board with this. So it took a long time to have the discussion that actually something that was much less formal doesn't have to be completely no frills. In fact, to be honest, it took a lot of organising and it wasn't very no frills. But all going there together, once we all got on board for that idea of something that smashed apart the conventional logic around it, was really easy. And I think looking at housing from the point of view of a professional body is that you see that all the time. There is a shared purpose across the sector. There's loads of different ways people go about it. But going back to the festival approach, everyone brings different expertise and skills. So, you know, I use the marketing brain to keep it looking and feeling informal. Our events folk did all the stuff, finding the right people and the right places to go to make it all work. The policy manager did all the kind of frontline housing practice instinctual stuff that they've got within their skill set to make sure it was something that wasn't for senior people. But collaboration to that shared purpose was what actually delivered it. And that was sort of, when Cheryl asked me to do a bit about Housing Festival, that was the big message that immediately jumped out that I wanted to get by just sort of waffling on. You can do things outside your comfort zone. You can challenge the norm as long as you've got good allies, collaborative people, shared purpose, that you cede a little bit of control back out to people, that you know, your audience informs what you're doing. That you listen and understand that not everyone is going to react to it in the same way. And I think the other big one is that you wildly plagiarise everything that's ever gone before you, because that's just the nature of culture, isn't it? It's everything is an expression of everything that's happened before it. And I think a little bit of it is that's why CIH is something I believe in as well. As well as working for them, I actually do genuinely believe that the stuff that the guys like the CIH Futures guys are doing is amazing. So all of housing, all these different people and experiences are all under one shared purpose, all working together. And that really, that kind of gets me sort of inspired to do all these things and to try new things like doing Housing Festival. I've just seen that there's loads and loads of questions, so I'm going to scroll back up and we'll do a bit of Q&A. I've had to leave the clock over. I literally had to take the clock off the wall because I can't see the time on my phone. So you'll have to tell me if I've gone miles and miles over, or we'll just stick around until nobody's on the feed anymore. But I'm going to go right back up the top and start doing some questions, if that's okay with everyone. Lots and lots of stuff about how we need better Wi-Fi. Isn't that the truth? You know, I grew up in rural Wales. Ooh, you want to see it there. Okay, challenging convention to become more inclusive. That's exactly what it was all about. It was saying that the current convention definitely excludes people. It's really intimidating. One of the pieces of feedback that led to it directly was Chief Exec in Wales had brought someone along to the big annual conference that we do, TIE, because they wanted to move away from being in the job they were in now to direct housing officer stuff. And they came along to this conference hoping to kind of go away inspired, but what they actually were was just baffled, because the conversations were really tailored around that kind of senior level. And I think that that's something that housing's quite good at, is jargon and making things kind of intimidatingly complex. So sometimes it's good to kind of think about the audience that isn't already with you, that there might be a different way of speaking that you need to try to engage them a bit more. Less rigidity appeals to more people. You're bang on, Ross. That's exactly what it's all about. I can't stand the whole sort of like suits and formality, and What was that Helen Reynolds cartoon? She did the one at the beginning of the conference where that's enough of the ado, but it's like 20 minutes into the conference. Why haven't you just been talking about something positive for 20 minutes? I'm sure I saw some... here we are, ad. Any plans from CIH to take the festival on the road? I think there are. We've just changed a few things. So there's now kind of a linked up cross-UK events team. So I think even if it's not just kind of housing festival, because I think mainly what worked was the ideas behind it. So I think they're probably going to be invested more and more in other things we do. I know a couple of events have already picked up on the session formats and trying to kind of democratise things. Like I know CIH Eastern are going to do something along those lines. But I think it's also that thing of just kind of poking the bear a little bit and saying, well, actually, we need to provoke ourselves into change is one of the ways to do it in terms of getting a big organisation to realise that there is even sort of an audience outside of the standard one. Let's have a look. What's the Tinder thing all about? Tinder, Brenda? The more we do things like this, the more relevant and engaging. Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think stuff like this is much better. It's using the immediacy of the stuff that we've got right now to kind of talk to people a bit more. What's been the most effective means of closing the loop post-conference? Closing the loop, what does that mean? You might have to expand on that one, Neil. Not with you there. We can do that for CIH Festival in a field with megaphones. That'll be my best ever. One of my absolute all-time work ambitions is to just be given a megaphone and go around shouting at people. It'd be so good. It's easy to get defensive when not everybody reacts the same, but it's fine. I reckon that's pretty wise, because it is. Like if you're doing something different and someone disagrees with it, that's not actually a showstopper. It just means that you need to think about their perspective and have a bit of empathy. Did we recap with people how they felt when outside of their comfort zone? That was actually something I cut out of what I was going to discuss. So we did a load of feedback stuff after the festival, where we did the kind of the traditional stuff about what did you think worked, what didn't, and there was some really interesting feedback in there, particularly around, I think the strongest feelings were around the main stage stuff, which is why I say I don't think we nailed it. But the other thing we did was kind of a reflective, what did you get out of the day? It was supposed to be all about change. What do you think will change as a result? Is there one thing you can take away? And kind of set that up as a bit of a feedback loop that we emailed that back to people after, I think it was 6 weeks. But it was something you could opt into. And not many people opted into it. I thought it would be something that people would be really into and kind of challenging that kind of idea that conference feedback is just for the organisers to change it. But also it's about what you learn and what the outcome is. So I think, yeah, I don't know how you go about capturing the rawness of it. It's a discussion we had for the next one as well. What's the output that comes out of Housing Festival that's going to actually change things and make a difference? We haven't. I'm well up for a discussion of ideas on that, because I think there's an opportunity to do something really cool with having those sort of numbers of people in the room. Cheryl, how do we find more opportunities for frontline officers to shape agendas or space to collaborate? I reckon that's one for CIH, to be honest. Offering people the platform to speak, offering them the opportunity to demonstrate that they do have ideas that should shape agendas. Something that I've just done recently that I think was really inspiring. Well, I keep saying inspiring, but which I'm normally a bit sceptical about, but actually it was. We did some interviews with the people who've been shortlisted for the Welsh Housing Awards. And what you get there is just loads of things where it's really simple, scalable ideas that have come out of the frontline people being frustrated at things not working the way they should. And so they've just fixed it. And I think that anything you can do to share ideas like that. So a really good example, and I'm going to do sort of a little health warning disclaimer. I don't know who's won, so don't read anything into this. But one project that really stood out for me was collaboration between Charter and Caerphilly, where basically they'd identified the homelessness officers in the local council as the key links in all this sort of prevention agenda that's going on in Wales. And they just sort of embedded a bit more collaboratively between the two organisations. They opened up a bit more of a dialogue. It was much less that we're chucking you cases that we can't solve, and there was sort of like a recognition of where the expertise lay. And they solved loads of really complex problems because of it. And it seems so simple and something that anyone could pinch as an idea. So it sort of restores my faith a bit in why people might do awards when you can raise the profile of something like that. Just a really simple idea that's going to make a huge difference. I'm pinching this for an ABCD discussion. I need to learn what ABCD means because everyone has suddenly started talking about it, and I have no idea. Question, talking awesome, but change often happens in the doing. How can we encourage more people to do stuff and talk about it? That is a really relevant point. One of the things that I want to do for a next step that I feel is kind of a responsibility from having done something like Housing Festival, where we did kind of think of it as a talking shop where we might discover new ideas and kind of reveal the expertise that's out there in the sector, is do a set of events that, and I'm still trying to persuade people that this is a really good idea, that are, again, like the unconference thing. I don't want to use a word when it's not the exact thing that it's going to be, but along the theme of a hackathon, where kind of you come in and there's a problem / kind of a set of problems, and by coming in and working in groups, housing professionals might actually do some solving of problems. And maybe that's a bit of the thing about Cheryl's question as well, working collaboratively. So making that sort of environment where people feel comfortable solving problems together that can then kind of be more widely shared by a body like CIH or any kind of big partner in the housing sector, just shining a light on stuff that people have actually done. I think that's a really fundamental thing that goes hand in hand with doing stuff like this. How do you take those ideas or positivity and help facilitate change from it? That's what I think we were trying to do with the feedback form, was actually help people to identify what they wanted to change and then give them an opportunity 6 weeks later to see whether they have changed it. I don't think it worked, but next time I reckon we can do better on that. Maybe it's about having something at the event which says, here's an initiative we're going to do. We want this to be about active change. So let's all feed into that thing and all have a look at these things in 6 weeks' time and see where we're at, see if we've actually done something simple and straightforward that can have changed our day-to-day work. Everyone's saying they got to go. A one problem workshop, or bring one problem each. That would be a cool format. That would be a really good idea. Because then you could have this thing of, like, if everyone brings one problem from their organisation, but you don't have to sit and stay with the people who've been working with the same problem. Actually, that'd probably be the worst way to do it, is if everyone looked at the same problem they've always been looking at. But yeah, I reckon that would be a really nice way of doing it. How do we convince the corporate old school that this format is probably more productive than the traditional? I think they go hand in hand, don't they? I think that this format supports the traditional stuff. I think there's still a role for, big set piece events that kind of, what's the word, make a big splash. They've got that sort of element of, we've got really great thinkers talking about problems, but what you need underneath it is something that invigorates the people that those big strategic and policy discussions are actually going to support. So I think it's not necessarily about better or worse. It's about saying that it's not binary, that there are people out there that want to work in a different way to the sort of established path as well. So something that I was talking about on Twitter the other day was that I think CIH Futures, whilst they were kind of brought in to the sort of the CIH fold to kind of think about the members of the future, I think it's actually got a bigger disruptive factor than that, which is that it's beginning to break out and change how, certainly I think, and I know colleagues in the professional body as well, who are thinking differently because of it. So it's things like saying, is the way we've always done things the best way of doing it? I know that should be a really obvious point, but then also kind of looking at, is just having one way of doing it the right way to be as well? So should we have lots of different ways for people who work differently, who want to do things in a different way, who want to kind of sit in different parts of the sector and work on, not everyone wants to go on a Route 1 sort of march towards chief execdom. I think that is something that has changed as a result is the way people think about progression. I don't know. Maybe that's all nonsense. Who knows? Maybe vote for one idea to support. Yeah, I think that could be cool. But then I think if you were doing that one problem workshop idea, wouldn't it be good to have sort of a range of problems come out of it at the end? Because you could almost kind of get sort of those people that are really good at capturing ideas at events there, writing it down, and produce a briefing which says, here were 6 problems that people brought to the table, and here were the 6 solutions that we thought of. And it might start a discussion about changing stuff. I don't know. I'd really like that idea, though. Everyone bring a problem. Would love to try this in all my regions. Steal away, Jill. Just pinch everything. Steal like an artist. It's what Barry did all the time. Just nick everything. Fresh eyes. I think that's exactly what it's all about. It's about not allowing the consensus to continue that there's only one set of people whose ideas are of value in terms of enacting. I think that's such an attitude that needs to change in the sector, is saying that there are opinions and values around the fringes of our sector that actually have as much worth and are as worth exploring, because from those will come big ideas and big things that are going to change stuff. Even if big events are used to show the impact of this stuff. Yeah, I think that's maybe a better way of expressing what I'm saying. So it's about having this stuff as a big collaborative group, and then also kind of the big set piece stuff that explains it to people who aren't us. Because I think if you were a non-housing person at Housing Festival, it would have been quite energising, because there's loads of people doing lots of interesting stuff and talking about things in an interesting way. But it also might have been quite baffling, because, you know, we've all got this sort of internal language. Let other people solve your problems. Yeah, I'm a firm believer in that. I'm completely lazy. And it's important for those problems to reach across housing, into governance, repairs, etc., appeal to more. I reckon that's another aspect, you're right, of why it's a good idea, is because you don't necessarily work in silos then as well. You know, if you want to come to something that's really cool, and the thing that interests you at that event is completely not your comfort zone, it's outside of the boundaries of your conventional work, then, you know, why not? Why not? Why not have someone that looks at how tenant representatives work in the governance structure, talking to someone on the DLO who has a different perspective and a different experience? I think only good things can come from listening to voices that we don't hear from all the time. Alison Inman sort of nailed it the other day. I was editing up something that we actually filmed at Manchester, where she was talking about the theme for her presidential year, and she said that sometimes it would be really, really good when we put together a platform as a sector and we start kind of saying that this is a person to listen to. We always have someone that we've never heard from before in that format and that platform. And I think that's sort of what we were trying to do a bit with Housing Festival, was highlighting and providing space for voices that don't normally get heard. I'm running out of steam a little bit because my voice is about to completely crack and sound like a sort of 12-year-old's breaking voice. Is everyone happy with that? I have no idea how long I've gone. I'm going to see if I can grab the clock. Quick tour of CIH's training room as well. Oh, lovely. Oh, we're well over time. I'm going to stop there. So next week is Geeta, and then the week after that is Julie Fadden. So tune in on Fridays, 12:30, more inspiration, more talking about things, more kind of thinking about things in a different way. And make sure that you keep an eye on what CIH Futures are doing, because I think it's really, really good that we've got a group of people that are working in a way that is completely different and challenging, and saying that there's a new generation coming, and housing is a bit old for my money, but there is a new generation coming who don't want to work always in the standard way. So I think solidarity to them. I'm with them. I'll see you all again. Cheerio.